The credit card statement trembling in my hands wasn't from the Austin wind rattling our Westlake Hills windows. $247 at Uchi Restaurant. Again. Third Thursday in a row. My name is Emerson Carter. I'm 29, and for the past 5 years, I'd poured my heart into building a corporate law practice and what I believed was a solid marriage with Griffin. But staring at that American Express bill, everything I thought I knew about my life was collapsing faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. Griffin Carter, my husband, my business partner, the man who vowed forever, had been lying to me for months. Those late nights he claimed were spent expanding our tech company's client base? Not boardrooms. Austin's most romantic Japanese restaurant, and he wasn't dining alone. The cruelest irony? I'm a corporate lawyer. I investigate financial fraud for a living. I should have seen it coming. But here's the thing about betrayal by someone you trust completely. Your brain refuses to process the obvious until it's screaming at you in black and white on a credit card statement. $247 every Thursday. Same restaurant. Same reservation slot, which I confirmed after borrowing access to the online system. Griffin thought he was clever. Honey, I need to work late Thursday. Big potential client dinner. He'd kiss my forehead, grab his keys, and drive his Tesla to South Austin while I stayed home reviewing contracts, believing his lies like a fool. The man who once brought me coffee in bed every morning was now spending hundreds on someone else's dinners weekly. The irony stung worse than the expensive Japanese whiskey he was probably sharing with her. I sat in our marble kitchen, the one we'd renovated together last year after endless arguments over cabinet colors. Like we had a future, and felt a cold, precise sensation settle in my chest. Not heartbreak, not yet. Something sharper. Professional curiosity. 3 years of investigating corporate embezzlement hone a certain instinct: pattern recognition, financial tracking, document preservation. Every law school-honed skill was telling me this went beyond restaurant bills. I pulled out my laptop and began digging. Griffin's business credit card revealed a fascinating pattern. Not just Uchi, but Tiffany & Co. purchases totaling $8,000 over 2 months. Nordstrom charges that didn't match a single item in my closet. And a monthly $2,500 payment for the past 4 months to Palmer Architecture Consulting. Palmer Architecture. My fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing public business registrations in Travis County. Palmer Architecture LLC. Sole proprietor. Monroe Palmer, 30, licensed architect. Office address matched a trendy East Austin building I'd passed 100 times. Monroe Palmer. Even her name sounded like a romance novel heroine. Within minutes, I found her LinkedIn profile. Stunning blonde. Effortless Austin chic. Vintage band tees paired with designer blazers. Probably the type to order overpriced avocado toast without irony. Her profile photo showed her laughing on some rooftop bar, likely where Griffin had been taking her while telling me he was networking, but my legal training didn't stop at her LinkedIn. I dug deeper. Public records, property ownership, marriage certificates. Monroe Palmer had been married for 8 years to Staff Sergeant Marcus Palmer, deployed overseas. 8 years. While her husband served our country in Afghanistan, she was playing house with my husband, and the credit card statements only made the picture clearer. Now Griffin wasn't just having an affair. He was funding someone else's double life with money from our joint business account. Money we had earned together. Money meant to secure our future. I printed every statement, every receipt, every digital trace I could find. As a corporate lawyer, I understood the power of documentation. But as a betrayed wife sitting alone in her kitchen at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday, I was constructing something else entirely: evidence for war. Griffin came home around midnight, smelling of expensive cologne I had never bought him. He kissed the top of my head while I pretended to read case files, unaware that I had just spent 3 hours unraveling his entire secret life. "How was your evening, honey?" he asked, loosening his tie. A new one I definitely hadn't seen before. "Productive," I said, closing my laptop with a soft click. "Very productive," he smiled. That same charming grin that had made me fall for him 6 years ago at that UT law school mixer. Back when I believed I'd found my person, my partner, my equal. But now I saw it differently. That smile wasn't charming. It was practiced, calculated, the smile of someone who'd lied so long he had forgotten what truth felt like. "I'm exhausted," he said. "Already heading toward our bedroom." "Sure it will be," I murmured, watching him vanish up the stairs. I waited until the sound of the shower running filled the house, then reopened my laptop. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as a plan began to form. Not just any plan, but one that would demand every skill I had honed in corporate law, every connection I'd built in Austin's legal community, and every ounce of strategic thinking I possessed. Griffin wanted to play games with my marriage, my money, and my future. Fine. He had forgotten one crucial detail about the woman he married. I don't just practice law. I win cases, big ones, the kind that ruin people who think they're untouchable. And Monroe Palmer? She was about to discover that playing house with someone else's husband while her own husband served overseas wasn't just morally bankrupt. It was about to become very, very expensive. I pulled up the Uchi restaurant website and browsed their private dining options. If Griffin loved that place so much, maybe it was time for a family reunion he'd never forget. After all, I hadn't met his new business partner yet, and I was eager to make her acquaintance. The next morning, Griffin left for client meetings, wearing his lucky cufflinks, the ones I had given him for our 3rd wedding anniversary. Watching him adjust those cufflinks in our hallway mirror while preparing to meet another woman felt like swallowing glass. I waited exactly 30 minutes after his Tesla disappeared down our street before making my first move. My downtown office had resources Griffin couldn't even imagine. As a corporate lawyer specializing in financial fraud, I had cultivated relationships with private investigators, forensic accountants, and digital security experts capable of tracing a paper trail through hell itself. "Emerson, you look like death," said Jessica Martinez, my paralegal and closest friend at the firm. "Everything okay at home?" Jessica had worked with our firm for 2 years, ever since I helped her escape an abusive marriage through pro bono divorce work. She understood betrayal intimately and could detect deception from 3 counties away. "Define," I said, dropping the printed credit card statements onto her desk. "I need you to run a comprehensive background check on someone. Full financial history, property records, business partnerships, social media analysis, everything." Jessica's eyebrows shot up as she scanned the documents. "Holy hell, Em. Is this what I think it is? Griffin's been having an affair for at least 4 months, using our business funds to wine and dine some architect while telling you he's working late." The words tasted bitter coming out of my mouth. "But here's the interesting part," she continued. "She's married to a deployed soldier." "That piece of garbage," Jessica muttered as she began typing Monroe's information into our investigative database. "What are you thinking? Divorce lawyer, private investigator, or are we going nuclear?" I sat down across from her desk, feeling that cold, strategic calm settle over me again. "We're going nuclear," I said, but carefully, legally, and with maximum impact. Within 2 hours, Jessica had compiled a dossier that could make the FBI jealous. Monroe Palmer's financial records told a fascinating story. 8 years married to Marcus Palmer, a career military man deployed for 6 of those years. During his deployments, Monroe had accumulated significant credit card debt, the kind that suggested expensive tastes on a military spouse's budget. But the real revelation was in her business records. Palmer Architecture LLC was struggling, behind on commercial rent, 3 months late on equipment financing, and facing a potential lawsuit from a previous client over project delays. Monroe Palmer needed money, and she needed it badly. Enter Griffin Carter, successful tech entrepreneur with access to business accounts and a wife too busy building her own career to notice unusual expenses. "She's not just having an affair," Jessica said, pointing to several suspicious transactions. "She's running a long-term financial extraction operation. Look at this pattern." The payment started small, then increased monthly. Classic financial manipulation technique. I studied the timeline Jessica had created. Monroe's first consulting payment from Griffin's business account coincided perfectly with her husband's most recent deployment. She had identified a target, developed a relationship, and systematically extracted money for 4 months while maintaining her marriage to a deployed soldier. My phone buzzed with a text from Griffin. "Working late again tonight, honey. Don't wait up. Love you, love you." The audacity made me want to throw my phone across the room. Instead, I picked up the line and called Uchi. "Hi, this is Emerson Carter. I'd like to make a reservation for 6 people this Thursday evening at 7:30. Private dining room, please." "Certainly, Miss Carter." "Any special occasion?" I smiled grimly. "Yes, it's a business meeting. The kind that changes everything." That afternoon, I made 3 more calls to set my plan in motion. First, Richard Carter, Griffin's father and primary investor in our tech company. Old school Texas oil money, the kind of man who valued family reputation above all else. He and Patricia had always treated me like the daughter they never had, especially after Griffin and I married in their family church. "Richard, it's Emerson. I want to invite you and Patricia to a special dinner Thursday night. Griffin's been working on a new architectural partnership I think you'll find very interesting." "Of course, sweetheart." "Patricia's been asking when we'd meet more of y'all's business associates." "Perfect." Second call, Judge David Palmer. Austin's legal community is smaller than people realize, and David Palmer was legendary. 30 years on the bench, impeccable reputation, a man built on integrity and family values. I had appeared before him twice in corporate cases. He was always fair but demanding. "Judge Palmer, this is Emerson Carter from Morrison & Associates. I'm calling about a business opportunity that involves your daughter Monroe. Would you and Mrs. Palmer be available for dinner Thursday evening? It's regarding a potential partnership between her architecture firm and my husband's tech company." There was a pause. "Monroe hasn't mentioned any tech partnerships, but Helen and I would be delighted to learn more about her business ventures." Third call, the most important one. I dialed the base liaison office where Marcus Palmer's unit was stationed, using my legal credentials to access deployment records. What I discovered made my blood run cold. Staff Sergeant Marcus Palmer was scheduled to return from deployment in 3 weeks, early, a surprise homecoming that Monroe hadn't been informed of yet. She was about to find out, courtesy of me, exactly what her wife had been doing while he served overseas. That evening, Griffin came home at his usual midnight hour. Smelling like expensive perfume and carrying Uchi leftovers in a bag, he thought I wouldn't notice. "How was your day?" he asked, settling onto the couch as if nothing had changed. "Interesting," I said, not looking up from my laptop. "I've been working on something that I think will surprise you." He kissed my forehead, the same casual gesture that used to make me feel cherished, now making my skin crawl. "You work too hard. You should take some time for yourself." The irony was suffocating. Here was my husband, spending our money on another woman for months, telling me to relax. "Actually, I've planned something special for Thursday night," I said, finally looking at him. "A business dinner. I think you'll find it very educational." Griffin's face shifted slightly, a micro-expression, but I caught it. A brief flash of panic before he masked it. "Thursday. I might have to work late again." "Oh, I don't think that'll be a problem," I said sweetly. "The people I've invited are very eager to meet Monroe Palmer. Your architectural consulting partner. I thought it was time we all got properly acquainted." The color drained from Griffin's face so fast, I thought he might faint on our Italian leather sofa. Thursday was going to be very, very interesting. Griffin barely slept Wednesday night. I could hear him tossing and turning beside me, probably trying to figure out how much I knew and how deep he was in trouble. Around 3 a.m., I heard him get up and pace the bedroom, his phone buzzing with what I assumed were frantic texts to Monroe. I pretended to sleep, but mentally ran through every detail of tomorrow night's plan like a prosecutor preparing for the most important case of her career. Thursday morning arrived gray and drizzly. Typical. Austin spring weather, perfectly matching my mood. Griffin emerged from our bedroom looking like he'd been hit by a truck. Dark circles under his eyes. Hands trembling slightly as he reached for his coffee mug. "About tonight," he began cautiously. "Maybe we should postpone this dinner meeting." I'm not feeling great. Absolutely not, I interrupted, buttering my toast with deliberate precision. Your parents are driving in from Houston specifically for this. Judge Palmer has cleared his evening schedule. Everyone's very excited to meet your business partner. The way Griffin flinched at the words business partner was almost satisfying. Almost. Emerson, I don't think you understand the situation. Oh, I understand perfectly. I looked up from my breakfast, meeting his eyes directly. I understand that you've been conducting business meetings every Thursday night for months. I understand that Palmer Architecture has been receiving consulting payments from our company account. I understand that it's time for a proper introduction. Griffin's face went through several color changes, settling on a sickly pale green that reminded me of overcooked seafood. He mumbled something about needing to check on office matters and practically sprinted out of the house. The moment his Tesla disappeared, I called Jessica. Phase 2 is go, I told her. How's our documentation package looking? Like Christmas morning for a divorce lawyer, she replied. I've got bank statements, restaurant receipts, hotel bookings we didn't know about before. And get this, Monroe Palmer has been using a credit card Griffin opened in the business name to buy furniture for what looks like a love nest apartment downtown. My stomach dropped. He bought her an apartment leased under the business LLC, but furnished with about $15,000 worth of West Elm and Pottery barn gear, all charged to our joint business account. $15,000. While I'd been eating frozen dinners and working late nights to build our company, Griffin had been playing house with Monroe Palmer in a downtown apartment decorated with my money. There's more, Jessica continued. The apartment lease has an interesting clause, month to month, but there's a buyout option after 6 months. Someone was planning for this to be permanent. A cold, focused calm washed over me again. This wasn't just an affair. This was a calculated plan to transition out of our marriage while maintaining financial security. Griffin and Monroe had been building a future together, using resources from my marriage, my business, and her deployment-bound husband's military benefits. What time did you tell everyone to arrive at Uchi? Jessica asked. 7:30 for our group. I checked Griffin's usual reservation pattern. 8 Tau every Thursday. The hostess confirmed they had a standing reservation tonight. You are absolutely diabolical, Jessica said, and I respect the hell out of it. That afternoon I did something I hadn't done in months. I went shopping for the perfect outfit. Not for Griffin. Not to compete with Monroe Palmer. For me, for the woman who was about to reclaim her life and her business from two people who had completely underestimated her. I chose a tailored black dress from Nordstrom. Professional. Powerful. The kind of outfit that commands attention in boardrooms and courtrooms. Paired with the pearl earrings my grandmother had left me and my lucky red lipstick, I looked exactly like what I was. A woman who had built her career on winning impossible cases. Around 5 p.m., my phone rang. Griffin obviously panicking. Emerson, I'm really not feeling well. Food poisoning, I think. Maybe you should cancel tonight. Poor baby, I said sweetly. Don't worry about driving. I'll pick you up from the office at 7. We can't disappoint our guests. No, really. I don't think I can make it. Griffin Carter, your parents have driven 3 hours from Houston to meet your business associate. Judge Palmer has rearranged his schedule for this dinner. You will be there, even if I have to drag you myself. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Sharp, I continued. Don't keep me waiting. At exactly 7 p.m., I pulled up outside Griffin's downtown office building in my BMW. He emerged looking like a man walking to his own execution, which, in a way, he was. You look nice, he said quietly, sliding into the passenger seat. Thank you. I wanted to make a good impression on Monroe Palmer. I've heard so much about her work. Griffin's hands clenched tightly in his lap. Emerson, there are things about tonight that you don't understand. I understand that Palmer Architecture has been receiving payments from our business account for months. I understand that you've spoken very highly of their consulting services. I understand that it's time for me to see what we've been paying for. The 15-minute drive to South Austin felt like hours. Griffin kept starting to speak, then stopping himself. Probably trying to figure out damage control for a situation that had already spiraled far beyond his control. Arrived at Uchi at exactly 7:25. The restaurant's sleek interior and soft lighting created the perfect atmosphere for intimate dinners, which explained why Griffin had chosen it for his weekly dates. Tonight, though, it would host a very different kind of gathering. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, your party is already seated in the private dining room, the hostess informed us cheerfully. Griffin looked like he might actually vomit right there in the restaurant entrance. We walked toward the private dining room, his steps slowing with each movement. Through the glass partition, I could see them, Richard and Patricia Carter, elegant as always, deep in conversation with Judge David Palmer and his wife Helen. 4 of Austin's most respected citizens, chatting pleasantly while waiting for the evening's main event. "Ready to meet your business partner?" I asked Griffin, my hand on the door handle. "Emerson?" "Please," he muttered, but I was already pushing the door open, my smile bright and professional as I greeted our guests. "Everyone, thank you so much for coming tonight. Griffin and I are thrilled to finally introduce you to his architectural consulting partner." I checked my watch. 7:58. She should be arriving any minute now. At exactly 8:03 p.m., Monroe Palmer walked into Uchi, wearing a stunning red dress and the kind of confident smile that comes from expecting a romantic evening with someone else's husband. She strode through the main dining area like she owned the place, probably anticipating another expensive dinner, funded by my business account, another evening of playing house while both our spouses remained. Oblivious, what she found instead was Griffin Carter sitting at a table with 6 other people, his face the color of weak, spoiled milk, while I stood and waved cheerfully. Monroe. Perfect timing. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Monroe Palmer from Palmer Architecture." The confusion on Monroe's face was priceless. She looked from Griffin to me to the table full of older adults, clearly struggling to process what was happening. "Griffin," she said uncertainly, "what's going on?" "Please sit down," I said graciously, pulling out the chair directly across from Griffin's parents. "We were just discussing the consulting work you've been doing for our company." Monroe's eyes darted to Griffin, who looked like he was contemplating whether jumping out the window might be less painful than staying in this room. "I'm sorry. I think there's been some confusion," Monroe said carefully. "Griffin and I usually meet here every Thursday at 8:01 p.m. "Yes, I know," I replied pleasantly. "That's why I thought this would be the perfect venue for our little business presentation." Judge Palmer leaned forward with interest. "Monroe, honey, you never mentioned you were consulting for a tech company." "It's a new partnership," Monroe stammered, finally sitting down but clearly wishing she could bolt for the exit. "Fascinating," said Patricia Carter, Griffin's mother. "What kind of architectural consulting does a tech company need?" I opened my leather portfolio and pulled out the first set of documents Jessica and I had meticulously prepared. "Excellent question, Patricia. I've been wondering the same thing." I placed the papers on the table, bank statements showing every payment from our business account to Palmer Architecture LLC, highlighted in yellow for easy reading. As you can see, we've paid Palmer Architecture $15,000 over the past 4 months for consulting services. That seems quite generous for a struggling tech startup, don't you think? Richard Carter, Griffin's father and our primary investor, picked up the statements with a frown. "Griffin? You didn't mention these expenses in our quarterly reports." Griffin opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "Oh, but that's not even the interesting part," I continued, pulling out a second set of documents. "These are credit card statements showing purchases made with our business credit card. Jewelry, furniture, restaurant bills. Quite a lot of personal expenses for business consulting." Judge Palmer's face darkened as he scanned the papers. "Monroe? What is this?" "Daddy, I can explain," Monroe stammered. "Can you?" I asked sweetly. "Because I'd love to hear how architectural consulting requires $8,000 in Tiffany purchases and a monthly lease on a downtown apartment." The silence at our table was deafening. Around us, other diners carried on with pleasant conversations, completely unaware of the nuclear explosion unfolding in the private dining room. Monroe shot Griffin a desperate look. "You said you were handling this." "Handling what?" asked Helen Palmer, Monroe's mother. I pulled out my phone and set it on the table. Actually, that reminds me. I have someone who's been very eager to speak with Monroe. I dialed the number I had memorized that morning and put the call on speaker. Staff. Sergeant Palmer speaking. The blood drained from Monroe's face so fast I thought she might actually faint. Marcus, Judge Palmer exclaimed. Son, how wonderful to hear from you. We're at dinner with Monroe and her business associates. Business associates? Marcus's voice carried that crisp military precision that comes from years of command. Sir, I'm calling because I've received some disturbing information about Monroe's activities while I've been deployed. What kind of information? Judge Palmer asked, his tone sharp and judicial, the same commanding voice I'd heard in courtrooms. Information suggesting that my wife has been conducting an extramarital affair with a married man named Griffin Carter, using his business funds to finance personal expenses while I've been serving overseas. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the ambient restaurant. Music 3 rooms away. Monroe's face crumpled. Marcus, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think, Marcus replied coldly. I've been provided with bank statements, photographs, and credit card records showing 4 months of financial infidelity. Ma'am, you've been living off another man's money while receiving military spouse benefits. Richard Carter looked like someone had punched him in the chest. Griffin, tell me this isn't true. Griffin finally found his voice. Dad, I can explain. No explanation necessary, I interrupted, pulling out the final document folder. Because Marcus isn't the only spouse investigating. Unusual financial activity, I placed the apartment lease on the table along with photos Jessica had taken of the furnished downtown loft. Griffin had used our business account to lease and furnish an apartment for Monroe. $15,000 in furniture, 6 months advance rent, and a lease-to-own option that suggested this was intended to be permanent. Patricia Carter's hand flew to her chest. Emerson, honey, are you saying? I'm saying that my husband and Judge Palmer's daughter have been conducting an affair funded by business money, military benefits, and marital assets from both households. Judge Palmer stood up slowly, his face a mask of controlled fury. Monroe Elizabeth Palmer, you will explain yourself now. Daddy, please, she whispered. You've been cheating on your deployed husband with a married man while living off his business funds. Judge Palmer's voice could have cut glass. Do you understand what you've done to this family's reputation? To your husband's military career? Marcus's voice came through the speaker again. Sir, with respect, I'll be handling my wife's discipline when I return to Austin next week. Early deployment return courtesy of the Red Cross family emergency, I reported. Griffin looked like he might actually die right there at the table. However, Marcus continued, I believe Mrs. Carter deserves to know that Monroe has been telling people she's planning to divorce me and marry Mr. Carter as soon as his business shows stable profits. The restaurant seemed to tilt sideways. Monroe had been planning to leave her military husband for my husband, using our money to finance her exit strategy. Richard Carter closed the bank statements and looked directly at Griffin. Son, you've used investor funds to conduct an extramarital affair. That's not just morally bankrupt, it's legally actionable. Dad, please, Griffin began. The Carter family name has meant something in Texas for 4 generations. You've destroyed that legacy for a woman who was using you for money while planning to abandon her deployed husband. I stood up, feeling lighter than I had in months. I think this business meeting is concluded. 6 months later, I sat in my new corner office overlooking Lady Bird Lake, reviewing contracts for what had become Austin's most exclusive legal practice, specializing in protecting women from financial infidelity. The view from the 42nd floor was spectacular, especially knowing this entire building had been purchased with the settlement from Griffin's corporate fraud case. Jessica knocked on my door, carrying 2 cups of coffee and that satisfied smile she'd worn ever since I'd made her partner in our new firm. The Palmer divorce was finalized this morning, she announced, settling into the client chair across from my desk. Marcus got everything, the house, the cars, and full restitution for the money Monroe spent during his deployment. And Monroe lost her architectural License pending the ethics investigation. Turns her out using your husband's military benefits to fund an affair while he's deployed is frowned upon by professional licensing boards. Who knew? I laughed, a sound that had become much more frequent since I'd stopped being married to someone stealing from me. What about her parents? I asked. Judge Palmer hasn't spoken to her since that night at Uchi. Helen Palmer started volunteering with Military Family Support Services, apparently as penance for raising a daughter who betrayed a deployed soldier. The poetic justice was almost too perfect. Monroe Palmer had lost her marriage, her career, her family relationships, and her financial security in one spectacular implosion, all because she'd underestimated the woman whose husband she'd been stealing from. Speaking of spectacular implosions, Jessica continued, Griffin's bankruptcy hearing is next week. Already? I said, surprised. That was faster than expected. Turns out when your primary investors are your parents, and they discover you've been using their money to fund an extramarital affair, they tend to withdraw support rather aggressively. Griffin had lost everything in our divorce: the house, the business, his trust fund access, and his parents' financial backing. The tech company we'd built together now belonged entirely to me, along with all its assets and future profits. His parents had been so horrified by his conduct that they wrote him out of their will and sold his childhood home rather than let him move back in. Last I'd heard, he was living in a studio apartment in East Austin and working as a junior developer for someone else's startup, the kind of job he used to hire other people to do. Have you heard from him recently? Jessica asked. He sent a letter last month. Something about being sorry and wanting to make things right between us. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the unopened envelope. I'd been using it as a bookmark. You never read it? Why would I? Griffin Carter stopped being relevant the moment I discovered he was funding another woman's lifestyle with my money. I tucked the letter back into my drawer. Besides, I've been too busy building something better. And I had. In 6 months, our firm had grown from just Jessica and me to 12 attorneys specializing in various aspects of financial infidelity. We'd helped dozens of women discover hidden assets, trace unauthorized expenses, and build divorce cases that protected their financial futures. The irony wasn't lost on me. Griffin's betrayal had taught me skills I never knew I needed, and those skills had become the foundation for the most fulfilling work of my career. Mrs. Martinez wants to know if you're available for the 3-hour consultation, Jessica said, checking her phone. Another tech wife whose husband's been making unusual business expenses. Always available for those cases, I replied. What's the situation? Monthly payments to something called Creative Marketing Solutions. Turns out it's an escort service. Ouch! How much? $30,000 over 8 months. I winced sympathetically. Set up the full package: forensic accounting, private investigator, divorce preparation, and make sure she knows about the pre-litigation asset protection strategies we discussed. Jessica nodded and headed for the door, then paused. Do you ever regret how everything went down? The public humiliation, the family drama, going nuclear instead of filing quietly? I considered her question seriously. 6 months ago, I could have simply hired a divorce lawyer, split our assets 50-50, and moved on. Instead, I'd chosen to expose Griffin and Monroe's affair in the most spectacular way possible, destroying both their reputations and financial security. You know what I regret? I said finally. I regret not trusting my instincts sooner. I regret believing Griffin's lies for as long as I did. I regret giving Monroe Palmer the benefit of the doubt when I should have investigated her immediately. I looked out at the Austin skyline, thinking about the woman I'd been 6 months ago, successful but naive, building someone else's dream while they systematically betrayed everything we'd supposedly created together. But I'd destroyed them both publicly. Made sure they faced real consequences. Made sure everyone knew what they were capable of. I smiled. No regrets at all. Griffin and Monroe had taught me something invaluable about trust, betrayal, and protecting yourself from people who see your love as weakness to exploit. Now I spend my days teaching other women that same lesson. and I've never been happier. Some stories end with forgiveness and reconciliation. This one ends with justice served cold, and it tastes absolutely perfect.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.